In this video, we're reviewing our new position inquiry builder available in 7.7. Particularly, we're reviewing the ability of the new inquiry to look into the manufacturing requirements of the business. That is the ability to look at open sales in the system and compare that to a formulation or a bill of materials to establish what raw ingredients are required to complete that sale. In addition to the overall tonnages, we'll look at how we can project those tonnages into the future. So we'll be looking at using 3 different reports that I've set up, 2 looking at lentils and 1 looking at a typical feed manufacturing formulation. So let's start by looking at this report, number 5 that I have set up. If I open up the report builder, we can see at the top that I've got the report set to build in metric tons. I've set my report currency to convert everything into my home currency. I've checked that I want to see purchase contracts and sale contracts. I could have asked for order entry and purchase orders, but I'm just sticking with purchase contracts and sales contracts today. And I've also put in a filter to only look at a certain amount of products, just so that for the purpose of the demonstration, we get a nice clean set of data. I've checked the box for time calculations and selected that I want to time my quantity and that I'm doing my timing on a monthly basis. And so we'll see the effect of that when we start up the actual inquiry itself. I've also got this checkbox raw tonnage calculations checked. Now this is the important part in terms of working out what our raw tonnages on sales is. And down here I've got the option to use a table set. Now in selecting that, this button that's labeled table becomes available, and I can click on that and I can see that I have a product number 191MS, which is my finished product, and a formula that's associated with that. So if I drill into that a little bit further and we have a closer look at this formulation, we can see that this formulation shows that we have 1 ingredient, which is some farmer dressed lentils. Now if we take 1 metric ton of those farmer dressed lentils, we produce 0.77 tons of machine dressed lentils plus a byproduct of 0.05 metric tons. So we have some loss in that formula, and we're going to see how the system uses that formulation to then work out how much of our raw ingredients we need to make this machine dressed lentil. Now, an important distinction between the 2 different types of reports that I've set up looking at lentils is this first one is not set to calculate sales byproducts, whereas if I check across to my 5A, I have checked to calculate sales byproducts, and we'll be able to see the difference of that when we actually go in and run the report in that case. The other report that I've set up today is this test number 6. This one we're looking at a product called, or 2 products called PL031 and PL032. These are formulated products. I've also got checked against them to look at purchase contracts and sales contracts, and I've got my timing set to time quantity over a monthly period, and I've also got my raw tonnage calculation set. On this particular inquiry, I'm using the product to get my formulation. Now what that means, instead of looking up the table to refer to a formula, we go back to the original product. So if I use my drill down into the product here, just to show you what I mean, against product PL031, you can see I have a formula loaded against that called feed. And if we look a little closer at the formula, you can see in this case I've got lots of ingredients that are making 1 produced product, which is typically the scenario that you'd see in a feed manufacturing operation. So the difference between those 2 methods there, in using the table, I'm able to record a set of formulations that we want to apply to this particular report. If I set it to use the product, then it'll look back to the original product to get the formulation, and so we'll always guarantee that we're looking at whatever the formulation for that product is. So good for feed manufacturing. So now let's look at the inquiry itself. In the top left-hand corner, I've selected the report that I want to look at, and when I click on Get Report, the information is retrieved in the layout that I've already set up. So I've been able to customize my layout to show that my product number is the first column on the left hand side, and I've got other fields like my original quantity, And importantly, for the purposes of this manufacturing inquiry, I've got a raw quantity and a raw product. Now the data is made up of two lines. I have a purchase and a sale line. The purchase is the second line and is a contract P1013, which is for my farmer dressed lentils, and I bought 100 tonnes of that. The sale line is for my machine dressed lentils, and I've also sold 100 tonnes of that. Importantly though, the system has worked out that based on my sale of machine dressed lentils, I need 129 tonnes of farmer dressed lentils to be able to complete that sale. And it's filled that details into this raw quantity field and raw product. So I can see that even though overall I'm square, when I look at my 100 tonne sale of machine dressed versus 100 tonnes of farmer dressed lentils, in actual fact, I'm about 30 tonnes short on my requirements of raw ingredients for the sales that I've made. I can also see, because I've added timing information to this inquiry, how that timing is going to play out over the coming months. And in this case, I've summed my January column to show that we're 2 tonnes long in January. If we now move on to the second report that I set up, I'll select test 5A, which is my lentils with byproducts. When I click on Get Report, the data fills into my inquiry in the same way that we saw the other report do, but in this case I've got 2 extra lines. Now why is that? Well, to start off with, I'm going to add an extra field into my display. So I click on my field chooser and I select this transaction type and drag it into the position that I want. Now this column shows me the source of each transaction. So I still have my sales contract of 100 tonnes, and I'm still require 129 tonnes of my farmer dressed lentils in order to complete that sale. I also have my purchase contract line, and we can see that this one is labelled with a PC, and it still says that I have 100 tonnes which I'm purchasing. In addition to that, in the background in the setup of this report, I checked that I wanted to include it. So I have an outstanding order entry, and that's against my byproduct lentils for 20 metric tonnes. I've got a line that's labelled SB. Now this is my sales byproduct. So based on the fact that we checked the box to say calculate byproducts, the system and calculate that because we are selling 100 tonnes of machine dressed lentils, we're also going to produce 6.5 tonnes of lentil byproduct. Now I can use my filters on raw product to select my byproduct and see the overall effect of whether I'm going to be long or short on that particular product. So the last report to review is our feed manufacturing example. So I select my report using my drop down and click on Get Report. Similar to the other 2 inquiries, for this one I have 2 sales, which were sales contracts. They were S1014 and S1015. Now because I've got raw product checked and because we've got multiple ingredients against these sale products, what we end up with is multiple lines against each contract. So you can see if I filter on this contract field and select S1014, we can see that there's only one product and only one sales contract, but our raw product is filled in a unique line for each ingredient that makes up that particular product. In our raw quantity, we calculated how much of each product we need and a contributing ratio of what will end up in our finished product. So our summary information shows us that we need 105 tonnes of raw product to make our 100 tonnes sale commitment. And we've got 4 ingredients that make up that commitment. Splitting the lines down like this allows us to analyse in a much deeper way what our raw product ingredient requirements are. So for example, if I grab my raw product column and I drag it up into the grouping section, we now see that we're grouping each of those lines by raw product. So if I look at my first one, which is a wheat ingredient, I can see that I have a requirement for 160 metric tonnes of this ingredient, and it will go into making up about 152 tonnes of finished product. I can see what those products are and what document they're against. Because I've got my timing on, I can actually see from month to month how much I'm going to use in each month. And I can do the same for each other ingredient. Similarly, I could use my filter and filtered by an ingredient. To see what my estimated usage was going to be, either overall or month by month. In this inquiry, I've also added in a warehouse column, and by dragging that up into my grouping, not only do I get to see my overall ingredient requirements, I can see that split up between the different branches. So my first warehouse, if I drop that down, I can see what my sales are against that and what my raw ingredient requirements are. And I can use my filter to show me what the requirements are for a particular ingredient at that particular warehouse and what the timing is on those ingredient usages.